Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Andrew Cassidy, who has more than 15 years of digital marketing and communications experience. He's currently the Senior Director of Digital Strategy and Engagement for the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, where he plans, directs, and administers the MBTA's digital presence and hosts the podcast Spilling the Tea. In addition, he's also the president and founder of Cassidy Consulting, a Boston-based marketing, PR, and communication consulting company. Using experience garnered from his distinct career, Andrew has helped catapult brands and engage whole new elements of their communities. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's my pleasure to have you. And for our listeners, Andrew's full bio will be linked in our show notes. So you can kind of get a full scope of his career and what he's done. But Andrew, why don't you start off by just telling us more about yourself, what you do, and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Sure. That's a long journey that we probably don't have time for. But presently, as you said, I'm the Senior Director of Digital Strategy and Engagement for the MBTA. And what that basically boils down to is I oversee the social media that you see, or anything MBTA related, the video production, the podcast, as you mentioned, things of that nature. And I've been here for about just over 5 years now. So it's been a very fascinating journey, but definitely one that was quite interesting. On the side, I have my consulting firm, Cassidy Consulting. We originated down in Miami and then kind of shifted up here for a different audience. And yeah, that's just one of those kind of a full offering of assorted features and services depending on what our clients need.
I love it. And backing up a little bit from before you previously joined the MBTA, which, as you mentioned, was about 5 years ago, could you talk about what you did and kind of what led you to this opportunity and the position that you have today?
Sure. Prior to that, I'd actually worked in higher education for quite some time. I was the director of social media for Miami-Dade College down in Florida, the nation's largest college, so 165,000 students, 8 campuses, 2 million alum, pretty massive, basically a city. Ended up shifting over there, coming back up to Boston to be director of communications for Emerson College, my alma mater. And I was very much enjoying both of those roles, but usually I'm just kind of seeking a challenge. I very much believe in that sign that's right behind you about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and just kind of challenging yourself. So there was a story in the Boston Globe. I remember reading it on my phone. I was still in bed, and it said, the MBTA is hiring for a social media director. It's first ever. You have to be crazy to want to get this job. Do you want to be bothered 24 hours a day, have people yell at you, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what, I'm looking for a challenge. I think I'm up for it. And thankfully the hiring committee agreed, and I've been here ever since.
That's amazing. And so going from higher ed to transportation, what was that transition like? Do you find that a lot of what you've done could translate over, or like you said, was it a true challenge and just kind of something totally new you had to get used to?
So it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve. I had been a lifelong MBTA rider for quite some time. I was a Blue Line rider forever. I didn't even get my driver's license until I moved to Florida, just because I didn't even need it while I was still living in the city. So I thought I knew everything you could know about the MBTA. And maybe I did as a rider, but there was a lot more to learn. And even today, I keep on learning. But the fundamentals of just knowing who your audience is, what they need from you as an organization, and the right way to kind of execute on that need. That's true for every business. And that's why I love doing the consulting thing as well. It's because you never know what the new challenge is. And you can have a
Mhm.
client like a restaurant. You can have a client. There was one that was, they specialized in large format printing for high-end photographers, and, worlds that you would never experience
Right.
outside of that. So I've always kind of appreciated trying to rehone my craft for all the different brands that I've been fortunate enough to work with.
Totally. And I can imagine that being a lifelong tea writer, that it likely contributed a lot to your work and being able to just be a quote unquote customer ultimately of what you do.
Absolutely.
You have all this experience and insight and ideas that you could bring to the table because of it, which is amazing.
Absolutely. No, it's been really interesting going from just, tapping my Charlie card to controlling the social media handles for the organization. It's definitely a shift, but I still ride the T every
Mhm.
time I'm coming into the office. So I'm still keeping my eyes on the ground as far as what's going on for that rider experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you mentioned that when you came across this position that it mentioned kind of having this 24/7 availability, which is something that typically happens in social. And
Yep.
so could you talk more about how you've been able to kind of juggle that, like being able to still quote unquote have your life and have time around it while still being able to deliver on the work that you do?
Sure. Every job comes with its challenges. The MBTAs can be a little bit more public, so
Mhm.
people are a little bit more well aware of the individual things that go on with us. But I know what I signed up for. I knew the state the MBTA was in when I signed up, and I wanted to make a difference in that regard.
Mhm.
There is a notion of why they call them public servants.
Yeah.
You really are at the disposal of the Commonwealth, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a fantastic experience, and to kind of mitigate again, things get more efficient the more you do them.
Yeah.
So with practice, you get that kind of smooth sailing approach, and there's less chaos even in the storm, where you are able to think clearly, still be strategic, and get the messaging out there. And it's also been a bit of a learning curve for the organization as a whole, because
Mhm.
we've gone through a lot of major changes, new general manager, new secretary of transportation, and bringing them in on communication best practices, marketing best practices, and really keeping that more goal oriented approach as to what is it that we really need to accomplish, what is the information that people need to get, and then figuring out the right cocktail of approaches to actually meet that goal, and get the riders the information that they need.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like crisis management is probably a lot of what you do just within communications and within marketing and whatnot. And I think that that's something that some brands can struggle with is because I mean, it's a good problem to have if they don't kind of get bad press, but when it does happen, they almost don't know what to do or don't know how to react. And so I'd kind of love to hear from your perspective and your expertise what you'd recommend for brands who might find themselves in that situation.
Absolutely. Thankfully, when I first came on board, I came on board in 2019. I think maybe a week after, at the time, a red line car derailed and struck a signal bungalow, which basically just shut off the southern half of the red line.
Mm,
And I knew right from that moment, this is where we are, and we're going to have to, move forward. And as I always tell people, I can't fix the trains as a comms professional, but I can change the way that we interact with our riders. I can pull back the curtain. I can give them the information so that they can make informed decisions about their travel options, let them
mhm.
know that we're making progress. And that's kind of been a big push for us, which is transparency.
Yeah.
Something that really I've been trying to champion since I came on board. Something that's what the podcast was birthed out of. But that's really kind of even the foundation of our entire social media and digital efforts, is that pulling back the curtain, inviting riders in, let them know the real struggles and challenges. When things go right, we celebrate. When things go wrong, we still talk about it, let everyone know what's going on.
Mhm.
And that's, pretty much a cornerstone for any brand who's facing crisis. Again, thankfully, over the past 5 years, crisis is less and less of my job, because the MBTA is getting better and better.
Amazing.
And there's a lot of really exciting things. Slow zones are going away, ridership is coming back. We're in a really wonderful time for the MBTA, but you need to control your narrative, because there's so many people out there who would love to tell your story for you, but you're the one who's most qualified to tell your own story. So again, being a public agency, sometimes the media will take it. You'll send out a press release, they'll distill it,
Mhm.
and they'll get mostly close to what you talked about, but they'll have their own added pieces, which of course is their role as journalists. But that was kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to lean in on social media and digital and video production, because it really allowed us to cut out the middleman and speak directly with our riders, and speak directly with all of our different stakeholders, so they could hear what was going on without that added tint that might come from an external piece. And then the other piece is, we have all of these people on our system every day. They need to get that information from a single source of truth. COVID, whatever was happening, we needed to be out there and letting them know, here's the safe way. Rumors start spreading very quickly. We had an instance where people were afraid to be on our vehicles because they're afraid the air was bad in if you hopped on a green line trolley or a train. And lo and behold, we were able to find the data that proved that, in fact, the airflow on our system is infinitely better than you'd have in like a restaurant or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like a 10 times more air exchange or something like that. So we're able to use that social listening, social monitoring to see where potential points of trouble might be boiling up, and then able to adjust our communication strategy to kind of quell those before they boil over into something else.
I love that. And I especially love what you've emphasized here about two things really, transparency and then also being proactive rather than reactive. So, like you said, being
Absolutely.
able to control the narrative and get ahead of things before other individuals or organizations kind of control the conversation from there. And I think that's really great advice with being able to kind of just for anyone to keep in mind. And people don't expect a company that's facing a problem to have a solution overnight, but they do expect to be kept up to date about progress that's being made, and they just want to make sure
Exactly.
that it's actually being worked on. And so I love what you've been talking about with your strategy of what you've been deploying, of how you're kind of showcasing the behind the scenes and just really being transparent with any users or other stakeholders of the T.
Absolutely. And it's even when it's just acknowledging that you're aware of the issue, because that's another one of the issues is a lot of the time people want to wait till they have every last bit of information before making a statement. Meanwhile, time is burning. People are, the rumor mill is churning.
Mhm.
It's great to just say, hey, we're aware, we're working with it, we'll provide updates as we have them, and actually deliver and provide those updates, which
Yeah.
is another piece that sometimes people don't follow through on.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned in your previous answer that the podcast Spilling the Tea kind of came out of this need or want to be transparent with users and stakeholders. And so I'd love to hear more about the podcast specifically, like how you knew that users and stakeholders wanted to listen to a podcast format and just anything about it.
Sure. So we originally had the idea, I think, back in either 2019 or 2020, but obviously things happened since 2020, so we didn't get to kind of go live as much as we wanted to. We had the name Spilling the Tea and all that. We wanted to move forward, and again, we were at a point where we needed to be transparent. There were issues with the MBTA back then, and we knew we had to garner some trust
Mhm.
because of everything that happened in the world. We ended up going in a different direction, doing more social first component. But with the bringing on of a new general manager, where we had just implemented all these speed restrictions across our system, we were in uncertain times for the MBTA,
Mhm.
and we knew that even a 20 tweet Twitter thread was not going to cover the depth of what's going on, to really, really educate our ridership, educate our stakeholders, advocates, and let them understand the real challenges that we're facing, all the work that's going on behind the scenes that they're likely unaware of, and the aspirations that we have for getting there. And that's where the podcast kind of launched. It ended up going live, I believe, October of last year, and it's been fantastic. The reception's been really strong, which is great because it's not a small lift, but the reception's been really positive. We were able to take singular individuals and really hyper focus on their areas of expertise, whether that be, planning and strategy, whether that be how we go about setting up diversions, financial realities of the MBTA. It's really anything and everything.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of our riders appreciate that. We also, it's not a propaganda machine. We welcome honest feedback. We don't do any edits where we're removing anything negative that someone might be saying about the MBTA. We invite our advocates on there as well, so people who you might have differing opinions or anything of that. We're not afraid to bring them on the show. We even brought there's an individual, his name's Jed. He did a bunch of TikTok videos that were kind of tongue in cheek about the MBTA. We had him come on board and talk about his views. So it's really been pretty honest, which I think our riders appreciate, where they're
Totally.
seeing what we're doing. They're actually getting to hear directly. It's not distilled through any process. They're really getting to hear directly from the individuals responsible for those particular sections of the MBTA. And it's something that we're churning forward with. Every month we're trying to get out a new episode. We have a lot of competing things, but we're keeping it going as for the foreseeable future.
I love that. And I really personally like that you chose the podcast format because riders typically listen to podcasts when they're on
Exactly.
the
Yep.
T. So it's like
Yep.
it must be funny if they're listening to a podcast about the T while on the T.
Exactly. And the other goal was also to, the other place where you might listen to a podcast is in your car.
Yeah.
And maybe you're in your car because you don't think that the MBTA is at a point where you're willing to commit to buying a monthly pass or something like that. Or
Hmm.
maybe you had a bad experience, but it's been some time since you were on board. This way you can listen, you can hear about the progress that's being made, and maybe hopefully you'll make the decision to ditch the car and hop on the T.
I love that. And I also always love speaking with other marketers because I love hearing about like their creative processes and how they come up with new ideas. And I'm especially impressed with marketers who work specifically for one organization or one
Mhm.
company, because I think it's really unique to be in a position to only focus on one client, so to say.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear how you just kind of keep your creative juices and ideas flowing and make sure that that part doesn't end up getting burnt out because unfortunately it can happen rather quickly in this field.
No, absolutely. That is an excellent point. It can be a struggle. I mean, I think there are times when we're in our creative doldrums, and maybe we're just kind of going through the process. But you really have to give yourself and your mind enough of a break, enough of a thought for you to be able to come in and really take the time to flesh some ideas out. So
Yeah.
we had a video going on, I think it was that last summer, maybe even the summer before. We partnered with the Boston Red Sox, which is obviously another great local team. And I always liken ourselves to the Red Sox because sometimes we may not make everyone cheer all the time, but everyone's always rooting for us. But we partnered with them. We had Wally the Green Monster. We shot this awesome video, and again, it was just trying to remind people that you're going to be stuck in traffic. Boston traffic is notoriously terrible. Then you have
Yeah.
to find a place to park. If you find a place to park, you're going to have to pay for it. And it's just, the best option you have is still public transportation, and to take that T. So it's been an interesting ride in that regard. But you really do have to give your opportunity yourself those breaks to be able to think. And I think that's always everyone's challenge is, I think a lot of people in the marketing space are more inclined to try and just always be on, always going, especially in the
Yes.
social world where it's 24/7. But you're going to hit a wall and you're going to deplete your battery, and you're not going to be able to get that quality out there. If you can take a break, a vacation, meditate, just take a walk midday during work,
Hmm.
uh, usually that's when the ideas start flowing in. And thankfully we've been able to kind of keep things fresh. We have a lot of new campaigns in the work. We have all different types, and we're an interesting organization where it's not just, hey, our one objective is getting riders. Absolutely, that's big, but we have a lot of education campaigns. We launched one at the beginning of this year called "I Rely on You." It was talking about the increase in operator assaults, where people are
Mm.
attacking bus operators, trolley operators, train operators, the like, and instead of targeting the audience of people who are doing these crimes, instead targeting fellow riders and saying like, hey, we have an app called CSay. You can anonymously report crimes directly to our transit police department. No one even knows that you're doing it. It's really discreet, and it's led to a positive success in that regard. So it's trying to figure out what the problem is or what the issue to address is, and again keeping that goals oriented mind so you can be creative about step two. You know what step three is, but you got to be creative in step two.
Absolutely. And that's such a great reminder that you shared about just being able to take a step back. It reminds me of a quote that I heard, which is something along the lines of, and I'm probably butchering this, but it's like, in order to move forward, you have to go back. And it's kind of like
Yeah.
the whole notion of just being able to pause and be able to evaluate and then be able to come back to whatever project or campaign or whatever it is that you're working on to come up with those fresh ideas. So I think that's a great reminder, especially in this day and age where I feel like, I mean, especially in marketing in general, but in this day and age, I feel like a lot of us are kind of in that hustle culture of just go, 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 go. And we worry that if we stop and breathe and
Hmm.
take a break, that it's going to hinder our growth. But in reality, it's actually going to propel us forward.
Absolutely. And it is a struggle to convince yourself that it's okay to take time.
Yeah.
I lose vacation days at the end of every year, so I'm equally guilty. But yeah, there's so much value. And the irony is when you stop thinking about work is usually when you have the best ideas for it.
Yes, so true. And in your previous answer, you had shared an example of a campaign that you did with the Boston Red Sox, which I think is so fun. And I'd love to hear other organizations or companies that the MBTA has partnered with to do fun campaigns. Because I feel like that's one of the best things about the city of Boston is that so many organizations are coming together and supporting one another and partnering and really being able to bring a great benefit to each other.
Absolutely. We try to be as Boston can be. So obviously we're a pretty major brand in the city. So that means that we of course have partnered with the Red Sox, which again
Hmm.
the Wally Takes the Tea campaign. We frequently partner with Dunkin' Donuts or just Dunkin', I guess. They give us Charlie, not Charlie cards. They give us gift cards that we give out. We have worked with New Balance in the past. So it's really just any of the kind of household names that you would know and expect. Celtics for Boston. Chances are we've done some sort of partnership with them, or at least open to doing partnerships with them because we're kind of we're all Boston together. When people think of Boston, they think of all of us. So it's kind
Yeah.
of a nice group to be with.
Absolutely. I love that. And speaking of partnering with organizations, in addition to what you do, you also have Cassidy Consulting, which I knew you
Correct.
mentioned briefly at the beginning, but I'd love to hear more about what you do with that and how you are able to just balance both your full-time job and your business. I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, it can absolutely be a challenge. The MBTA obviously takes the lion's share of my time,
Hmm.
and justifiably so. But I like to continue to hone my skills with additional clients. Take on new challenges outside of public transportation,
Hmm.
and I basically just kind of love a challenge. I love puzzles and just being presented with, again, the outcomes of an organization, maybe in a field I'm not familiar with, and trying to find that solution for them. So this is
Yeah.
everything from, marketing, PR, crisis management, should someone be going through a crisis. And it's really full service, whether it be, web design, anything along those lines, or if it's more on the executive training side where people need to work on building their personal brands, being able to master an upcoming keynote or things of that nature. And that's kind of where we kind of found our niche.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it also, as we were talking about earlier, with being able to take a break to give you ideas, I imagine that the work that you do with Cassidy Consulting gives you ideas for the MBTA and then also vice
Absolutely.
versa.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, again, I think you use different parts of your brain, and you're just kind of always flexing different muscles up there.
Yeah.
And, it keeps you nimble. A lot of the time, people get pigeonholed into what are my competitors in the same space doing?
Hmm.
And sometimes there's success stories that you could mirror or build upon that are in completely different industries, but still apply to you.
Yep.
Um, I remember a long time ago, like when I was first starting out in social, I'd say, or maybe a little bit halfway through, GE was doing a campaign they would take people behind the scenes for like GE things. They go inside giant wind turbines and all this other stuff. It's like, I'm never going to buy a wind turbine, but this is super fascinating. And, I like the brand and I'm learning. And I'm like, I could apply that. And I think at the time I was probably applying it to higher education and different pieces like that. But, there are so many examples out there where people are absolutely killing it in a field that's unrelated. And you just need that little bit of creativity to see where the one-to-one could be for you in your industry and how you could utilize that approach versus, my just kind of seeing what the MTA in New York is doing, the CTA in Chicago is doing, and trying to copy off of their notes. Maybe there's something that Netflix has done that's really cool. Maybe there's a mom and pop that's like going viral on TikTok. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and you really just never know. But you just kind of have to keep consuming and keep an open mind to be able to ideate and come up with what works best for your brand.
Absolutely. And that's such a great point too, of just being able to look past like your quote unquote competitors, like being able to, like you said, Andrew, look at other companies or organizations that are doing something really cool and thinking to yourself, like, what page can I take out of that book and apply to my own campaign or my own strategy? And that will definitely kind of help to bring fresh ideas rather than seeing all these like-minded organizations or companies just kind of rinsing and repeating the same thing over and over again.
I think part of this is also, I have that background in education. Education's really near and dear to my heart.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I've even challenged my employees to do this, where I've given them, homework assignments, so to speak, where I'll have them, look at brands. I'm like, what's going on in social media this week, or what's going on in digital this week. Um, Show me a campaign or a post or something that you like that's outside of our industry. And again, it's forcing yourself to just think a little bit differently. And I think that's really where you can tap into some amazing stuff with creativity.
Absolutely. And especially since marketing and social media specifically are always changing, it's good to kind of
Always.
like be on the pulse with that and kind of always look at new ideas and see some new and exciting things that are coming up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the difficult challenges of this industry, and one of the things that keeps it fresh, I guess, for anyone who works in it, is things change all the time.
Yes.
Video has become increasingly more important. We've all seen podcasts come and go and come and go and come and go, and it looks like they're sticking around now. But things change, and you have to be nimble enough to change with them. As I
Hmm.
always tell people in this field, you have to be a Swiss Army knife of communication. You have to kind of understand all the different pieces. You don't have to necessarily be the best at any individual one, but you really have to know how to shoot video, how to take photos, how to write copy. And maybe how to do a little bit of editing. And with all those different pieces, you can, take the Taco Bell method and mix them all together for the same ingredients in different ways, whether it be a podcast, a video, TikTok, what have you, blog entries, anything of that nature.
I love that. And speaking of kind of like being in the marketing field, I think you just gave really great advice about people who are looking to kind of get into it and consume all this content. But like, what would you say is something that marketers should know for 2025? Like, I know you said video is huge, which
Mhm.
I totally agree with. But is there anything that's kind of been on your radar that you think people should be like paying attention to or kind of incorporating more of?
Great question. I think one of the big pieces, it's not, I guess, specific to 2025, really, but it's something that I notice is the deal maker or deal breaker, which is just a fundamental understanding of storytelling. I
Mm,
think a lot of the time people get focused on the new thing. They get focused on like really high quality video, high quality this, that, and the other. And it's great. But if you can't make me care about it, that's the piece. It's really finding the way to make people care.
yeah.
Obviously, we're still paying attention to whatever emerging platforms are out there. We're on TikTok, we're on Threads. You can follow the MBTA pretty much anywhere. Um, but as far as like fundamental shifts, I think that's kind of been a tenet that has evolved in the way in which you tell stories. But the
Mhm.
storytelling piece should not be taken for granted. And if you have that, you will be successful in this field.
Great reminder. I think people sometimes lose sight of that with, like you said, with all these new things coming out and new campaigns to focus on, like storytelling is really at the heart of it all. And so, like you said, that's really the number one driver for being able to resonate with someone or encourage them to take some type of action.
Absolutely.
I love it. Andrew, as we get closer towards the end of this episode, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'd love to hear the places that you love to frequent throughout the city.
Favorite local business. I'm gonna go with Santarpio's in East Boston,
Oh, good
conveniently
choice.
located on the blue line of the MBTA, walking distance from either airport or Maverick stations. That has been a staple of my life, my family's life. My grandparents went there. Like it's been around for over 100 years. It's a very unique pizza. It's a very unique experience, but it is
Hmm.
hands down my favorite. And they have another location in Peabody if that's closer for you. But I'm gonna go with Santarpio's.
Good choice. I am an avid pizza fan, so I love when people always mention some type of pizza place. Andrew, this has been such an awesome episode, and I've really appreciated having the opportunity to have you on the show. And I'd love it if you could share with our listeners where they could find you online in case they'd like to connect further.
Sure thing. You can find me on LinkedIn fairly easily, or you can find me on Twitter at Andrew_Cassidy.
Perfect. And I will link to those places in the show notes so that way our listeners can click through and connect with you from there. But thank you so much again for being a guest on today's show.
Thank you for having me.